You guys, it's Tommy from Saleslucky.com here again. And so this point number 3 is how to sell yourself. It's incredibly important, not just for interviews, but when you meet somebody, when you're, even if you're out on a date, it's in general in life. How do you sell yourself? How do you present yourself in the best light possible, with things that are true about you, to sell yourself? And specifically here today, we're talking about in the context of a job interview process. And some key points to remember are, and questions to ask yourself are: what are some things you've accomplished? What are some things you've achieved? What are some stories you can share about your unique interests or talents? What are some stories that you can share about the challenges that you've overcome and the traits that you've developed over time that are going to be important in sales? So it when in the process of selling ourselves, it's important to tell stories and anecdotes and examples about um, how you're basically unique. What's special about you? What's different about you? I know, I don't mean that in like the hokey pokey or you're special type of thing, but I mean like what's different about you? We're all individuals. We've all gone through different life experiences, learned different lessons in different ways, and overcome different things. So we all have something interesting about us. So what are those interesting things that you can share that also demonstrate abilities and capabilities where that would translate into sales success? So, for example, I'll share with you a couple stories. So, when I interviewed for one of my previous roles, I was the youngest rep hired at the time. I interviewed with the recruiter. She talked to me. She said she thought I was great, but she had one concern. She thought I was a little green, a little bit inexperienced. And then she said she'd bring the VP in to have a chat. And he sat down with me, and we started having a chat and made such a connection there, and he saw something in there in me in that meeting where he asked me what kind of salary did I want to take, if he was going to give me a job. I gave him a number, and he basically said yes to that number and gave me a job on the spot. So I ended up becoming one of the youngest rep hired in that company, to within 4 years being one of the top reps in the company. Um, uh, Across the sales floor, about 50 people, top 10% of the company, basically where everybody had more sales experience than I did, 5, 10, 15, sometimes even more than that sales experience than I did. But somehow I became one of the top performers. I was consistently exceeding quota across this floor of 50 salespeople, where about 80% of the people were not hitting quota. So I tell recruiters that, what does that show? Well, that shows a couple of things, right? That shows that a VP, a senior executive, was had enough insight to see something in me. He gave me a shot, and he was right in that. He gave me a shot and ended up becoming one of the most successful reps. That shows that there was something special about me, where someone that was the youngest hired came in to become one of the top reps in the company, where everybody else, although they had more experience, they didn't perform as well. So there was something about me that the VP saw, and throughout my tenure there, that whatever he saw in me, or the other traits in me that allowed me to be successful, that was validated. So there's something special about me, or something's there about me, right? Um, and I'm telling that story, and that's what's being conveyed to the recruiter or hiring manager. Another story I'll tell is how, at that same company, I did so well there that at the end of the 4 years, while I was still in my 20s, I felt like I had proved to myself I could do the role, and after 4 years, being a top rep and consistent performer there, I wanted to take some time off and really do some traveling. And I did well enough to where I ended up convincing the company to let me work from South America. So a pause right there. So that's not something that's really common that you hear every day, right? a company letting somebody, a salesperson in their 20s, work remotely from South America. Whoa. Like, what does that show? Well, one, it certainly validates that I was a top performer, because a company's probably not going to let uh, a non-performing salesperson go work remotely abroad, especially someone in their 20s, who was just looking to do that for fun, right? To live life. And so, that was really awesome. But what else does it show? It also shows that I built up significant trust with the company to where they were able to let me do that. So those are true stories. And so what you want to do is you want to tell stories about yourself that are true, that show basically how special you are, how unique you are, your character traits, your personality traits that will translate or have translated into success in sales. The final story I'll share with you is the story of how I mentioned I was really green or inexperienced at first when I first started in terms of years of experience, but um, you know, recruiters would ask me all the time, "What is it that you did, Tommy, that allowed you to be successful when other people were not?" Well, aside from reading 200 or so books on sales, business, personal development in the past 5, 6, 7 years, when I started this job I was telling you about, I would record calls. I would hop on the calls with my VP. I would record those calls. Then afterwards I would go home and I would listen to the entire call recording, and I would transcribe the entire hour-long call on a Word document. And then after I transcribed the entire call, I would annotate the entire call sentence by sentence, annotating exactly why I think what my VP said worked. Because you have to understand, I wanted to learn, I wanted to get good at sales, and my VP was from South Africa, so he didn't speak English like maybe you or I, so he has spoke differently. But I wanted to learn exactly why what he said had worked. So I would tell recruiters that story. I would tell hiring managers that story. And that would make a great impact on them, because that would show a couple things. One, I was willing to put in the work outside of work hours to get better. Two, I was willing to do stuff that most people were just not willing to do, which shows that I would go the extra mile in being successful, and that I took it into my own hands to make sure that I was successful. And that shows a lot of things. That shows my work ethic, my willingness to do what it takes, and my willingness to stand out. So this is what you want to do. You want to tell stories about your life, and everyone has stories like these. Yours doesn't have to be. It's not going to be the same as mine. Yours are going to be different, but everyone has stories like these. And one reason why stories are more powerful than just saying we're hardworking is because we humans have just adapted over countless number of years from tribal like times to learn from stories. When we hear a story, we instantly process that information and deduce the takeaways about this person, or about the situation. So when we tell a story, we allow the listener to make what's the word I'm looking for, deductions and takeaways about us in that story. So they're coming to the conclusion, oh, Tommy's willing to go the extra mile. Tommy's willing to put in the work when others aren't. Tommy's willing to do things that might be unconventional, or whatever it might be. Or Tommy is willing to take things into his own hands to make sure he's successful, and is willing to do whatever it takes. They're drawing those conclusions, as opposed to me telling them, as opposed to you telling them. So that's a quick summary of overview of how to sell yourself 101, especially in a job interview context. So what are some of those stories that are true for you that you can tell in job interviews, just like I shared with you? Anyways, guys, hope you guys found this valuable, and talk to you soon.